I never meant to stay as long as I did. The library had been closing in 20 minutes, and I only came to print out an assignment I should have finished hours earlier. But I was there, staring at the same sentence in my notes, when she leaned across the table. "You're holding the wrong edition," she said, voice low, like she was careful not to disturb the silence more than necessary. I glanced up. She had the kind of face that didn't belong in fluorescent light, sharper under it, almost too vivid against the dull carpet and chipped tables. I hadn't seen her before, not really. Maybe once or twice, returning a stack of books with no hesitation, like she knew exactly where she was headed. Now she was looking at me. Waiting. "Wrong edition?" I repeated, mostly to stall. Her mouth curved, half amusement, half patience. She pointed to my book. "That one's outdated. The syllabus switched last semester." The examples are all different. I folded the corner of my notebook down, even though there was nothing there worth saving. Guess that explains why I don't understand half of it. She smiled, quietly, almost as though she wasn't supposed to. Then she reached into her own bag and slid a book across the table, the correct one. No hesitation. "Here. I don't need it tonight." Something about the way she said it made me nod before I thought twice. Her nails were short, neat. My eyes flicked to her hands a second too long, and I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Thanks," I said. She gathered her papers, a stack far more organized than mine, and for a second I thought she'd leave. But she didn't. She sat back down across from me, sipping from a thermos she kept near her elbow. "You're in Professor Lang's class?" she asked. "Yeah. You too?" She shook her head. "I teach." The word caught me, though I tried not to show it. "Not that class," she added, catching my pause. "Different subject. But I help out with some tutoring when students fall behind." She tilted her head toward me. "You're behind." It should have sounded like criticism, but it didn't. More like observation. I shrugged, trying for casual. "Just juggling things." She let the silence hang. I could feel her eyes on me, like she knew the truth. I wasn't juggling much. Just drifting. Filling empty evenings with late-night study sessions that went nowhere, notes that never got organized, text I typed but never sent. She opened her notebook, started scribbling without asking. Her pen scratched against the page in steady rhythm. When she turned it around, I saw neat diagrams, the problem broken down step by step. "Try this," she said. Her handwriting was careful, precise. I traced the lines with my finger without meaning to. She watched, and for a moment it felt like the quiet between us wasn't silence at all, but something taking shape. We went through one problem. Then another. I barely noticed when the intercom announced 5 minutes until closing. "You pick things up quickly," she said, closing her notebook. "Only because you explain it better," I replied. It slipped out before I could soften it. She looked down at her thermos, hiding a smile. The lights flickered once, a signal from the staff. She stood, gathering her things. At the door, she paused. "You'll be here tomorrow?" It wasn't quite a question. I nodded. She hesitated, just a fraction, then. "Bring your homework. We'll work through it." And then she was gone, the echo of her steps fading. I stared at the book she left me, at the neat diagrams still open on my desk. For the first time in weeks, I didn't want to leave. The next evening, she was already there when I walked in. Same table, same thermos, same steady focus. She didn't look up right away, just motioned to the seat across from her, as though it was reserved. "You're late," she said. "By 3 minutes. 3 is still late." Her tone was flat, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. I sat down, dropped my notebook with more noise than I meant to. She slid a tea bag across the table. "They only had chamomile left. Thought you might need it." I don't even drink tea. But I took it anyway, fingers brushing hers as I did. Too quick to mean anything. Too obvious not to notice. We worked through the first problem in silence. Her handwriting again, precise, almost elegant. I wondered if she wrote like that in her grocery lists too, or only when someone was watching. At some point she leaned back, resting her chin on her hand. When I was your age, I was already married, she said suddenly. I paused, pen midair. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. You still married? I asked, because the silence demanded something. No, she said simply. Haven't been for a long time. Her eyes stayed on the page, but her voice shifted, lighter, but brittle underneath. I nodded, unsure what to do with the truth she'd placed between us. It made me picture things I shouldn't, her at 20, wedding ring on her hand, laughter at some reception I'd never see. And then, just as quickly, her now, sitting across from me, sipping tea from a thermos she carried everywhere. The distance between those images felt like a cliff. You ever think about it? I asked before I could stop myself. Marriage, I mean. She gave a short laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes. Less and less. That should have ended it, but the silence after stretched long. Too long. I fiddled with the tea bag string, winding it around my finger until it left a red line. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably another group chat I wouldn't answer. I didn't check. Instead, I asked, So why tutoring? You don't seem like you have the time. Her eyes flicked up. I like the quiet. And sometimes. She stopped, looking almost embarrassed. Sometimes it's nice to feel useful. Something about the way she said it landed heavier than it should. Like she hadn't been needed in a while. The staff flicked the lights again. Closing time. We packed slowly, either of us in a rush. At the door, I held it open for her. She brushed past, close enough that I caught the faintest scent of her perfume. Not floral, not sweet, but something steadier. Outside, the night air was cool. She turned to me, hesitation in her eyes, as though she might say something else. But all she did was reach out, straighten the corner of my notebook sticking out of my bag, then let her hand fall away. A small gesture, meaningless to anyone else. But it stayed with me, heavier than words. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It became routine. Tuesdays and Thursdays, same table in the library, the same steady rhythm of pens scratching paper and whispered explanations. I started showing up early, just to see if she'd already claimed the spot. She usually had. That night, though, something was different. She was restless, shifting in her chair, eyes flicking toward the entrance like she was waiting for someone else. You okay? I asked. She nodded too quickly. Long day. I didn't push, but I noticed her hand tapping against the thermos. Not her usual calm. I tried focusing on the worksheet, but every silence felt louder than usual, every brush of her sleeve against mine sharper. Halfway through, a voice broke the quiet. Hey, isn't that your professor? I froze. A friend from my class, standing in the aisle with a grin that didn't mean much, but still made my chest tighten. I shook my head quickly. No. Just, she's helping me with homework. My friend raised his brows, looked at her, then back at me. Something unspoken hung there before he muttered, Right, and walked off. Her jaw tightened. She didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. This isn't. I mean, people will think. She stopped herself, exhaling. I stared at the page, the numbers swimming. I know. The silence that followed was thick. She sipped her tea, but I saw her hand trembling slightly against the thermos. We tried to continue. One problem. Two. But neither of us was really in it. Every time her pen brushed my paper, every time our eyes met, I felt the space shrinking and stretching all at once. She leaned closer, pointing at a line I'd missed. Her hair brushed my shoulder. I didn't move. Couldn't. You see? She whispered. I nodded, though I didn't. All I saw was her hand, steady and close enough to touch. The lights flickered, the closing signal. Relief and disappointment in the same breath. We packed in silence, both slower than usual, as if dragging out what little time we had left. At the door, she walked beside me, our steps almost in sync. When we reached the corner, she stopped. The street lamp threw her face into half shadow. She looked at me, lips parted as though she was about to say something. I could feel the pull, the way her hand twitched like it wanted to reach out. I didn't breathe. Her eyes flicked to my mouth. Just for a second. And then she stepped back. Shook her head lightly. Good night. She turned before I could answer, leaving me there, notebook heavy in my bag, chest heavier still. It wasn't a kiss. Not even close. But it felt like we'd been standing on the edge of something neither of us knew how to name. She didn't come on Tuesday. I sat at our table anyway, notebook open, pen in hand, pretending to study. Every time the doors opened, I looked up. Nothing. By the time closing was announced, my tea had gone cold. Thursday, she finally appeared. Not with her usual calm, but hurried, hair pinned back loosely, a crease in her brow. She saw me, hesitated, then walked over. Sorry, she said, setting her thermos down. This week's been. She cut herself off, shaking her head. Never mind. We worked in silence. Her explanations came faster, clipped. I could tell she wanted to be anywhere else. The air between us was different now, thinner, sharper. When we left, she didn't walk ahead like usual. She matched my pace. Outside, the night air was cool and damp, the kind that clung to skin. We stopped near a bench under the street lamp. She sat, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for days. I sat beside her, not sure if I was invited. For a while neither of us spoke. Just the sound of cars in the distance, the ticking of the lamp overhead. Finally she said, "One of my colleagues saw us last week. In the library?" I swallowed. And she asked if I was involved with a student. She said it flat, but her voice wavered. I told her no, of course. But, she broke off, pressing her fingers to her temple. It made me think. About what? Her laugh was short, bitter. About how stupid I'm being. Sitting here with you. Letting people wonder. I stared at my hands. It's not stupid. She looked at me then, sharply. You're 20. She stopped, searching for the right word. Too old to be sitting on a bench with you at midnight. The words hung heavy. I wanted to say something, to break it apart, but nothing came. Instead, I asked quietly, Then why are you here? Her lips parted. No sound at first. Then, softer than I'd ever heard her. Because I wanted to be. The silence after that was unbearable. My pulse loud in my ears. She looked at me, really looked. Her eyes softer now, searching. For what I didn't know. Forgiveness? Permission? I wanted to tell her everything. How the nights felt less empty when I knew she'd be there. How her small gestures had become the only steady part of my week. But the words stuck. So I said the simplest thing. I don't want this to stop. Her breath caught. She looked away, down at her hands, twisting the cap of her thermos until it squeaked. Then she whispered, barely audible. And if it can't last? The question hung between us, fragile and heavy. I didn't have an answer. And she didn't look at me to hear one. The next week, she didn't come at all. I waited both nights, same table, same cold tea. Each time the lights flickered for closing, I told myself maybe she'd just been busy. Maybe next time. By Thursday, hope felt like a bad habit. I stayed anyway, eyes on the door, every shadow making my chest tighten. But she never appeared. Friday afternoon I saw her. Not in the library, on the street, walking fast with a bag of groceries. I almost called her name, but then I noticed the boy beside her. 17, maybe 18. Same sharpness in the face, the same tilt of the chin. Her son. She laughed at something he said, and for a moment she looked lighter than I'd ever seen her. Different. And I realized she had a whole life I'd never been invited into. I kept walking. Didn't say a word. That night I typed out a message. Did I do something wrong? My thumb hovered over send. Then I deleted it. Typed again. Hope you're okay. Deleted that too. The phone screen went dark. By Tuesday, the seat across from me stayed empty. I tried working alone, but the pages blurred. Every problem looked wrong without her notes in the margins. Midway through, I caught myself staring at the chair, imagining her there, thermos at her elbow, correcting me in that steady voice. I shook it off, embarrassed even though no one was watching. On Thursday, I didn't go at all. I wandered instead, past the bench under the street lamp where we'd sat. The air was damp again, like that night, but colder. I stood there longer than I meant to, replaying her words. And if it can't last? I hadn't answered then. Maybe I couldn't. By the time I got home, I opened my notebook. The page she'd written on was still there, neat diagrams, careful handwriting. I traced the lines with my finger, the way I had that first night. My chest ached in a way I couldn't name. I typed another message, thanks for helping me. I wouldn't have kept going without you. I stared at it, thumb hovering. Then I locked the phone and set it face down on the desk. Didn't send it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next Tuesday, I went back to the library. Not because I thought she'd be there, because I didn't know where else to go. I took our table, opened my notebook, and waited. The seat across from me stayed empty. She came back on a Thursday. I almost didn't notice her at first. I was bent over my notes, pretending to work, when her thermos slid across the table. Same place as always, near my elbow. I looked up. She didn't sit right away. Just stood there, eyes searching my face like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. You left this last time, she said softly, holding out a pen I'd forgotten weeks ago. It was such a small thing, but my chest tightened. I nodded, took it, turning it between my fingers. Thanks. She sat then, folding her hands on the table. No notebook. No papers. Just her. I should have told you. She began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. About my son. About everything. I shook my head. You don't owe me explanations. Her eyes softened, but she kept going. I pulled away because I was scared. Of how it looked. Of what it meant. She exhaled, searching for the word. You're young. And I didn't want to be selfish. Her voice cracked on the last word. I stared at the thermos, at the way her fingers tightened around it like it was the only steady thing she had. You weren't, I said finally. Selfish, I mean. Her eyes lifted to mine. Something in them flickered, hope, regret, I couldn't tell. We sat in the quiet. Around us, the library buzzed faintly, but it felt like just us. I missed this, I admitted, surprising myself. Not the homework. Just sitting here. With you. Her breath caught. She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me, long and steady, like she was deciding something. Then she said, barely above a whisper. I did too. The words hit harder than they should. Not a confession, not a promise. Just truth. Closing time came. Neither of us moved. Finally she stood, and I followed her outside. The night was cool, the air sharp. We walked to the same bench as before, stopping without saying why. She sat, and I sat beside her. The silence stretched again, but it didn't feel empty this time. I don't know where this goes, she said, voice unsteady. Maybe nowhere. Maybe it's just two people who happen to find each other for a while. I nodded. Maybe. But it mattered. Her shoulders eased, just slightly. She turned to me then, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her gaze. I thought she might lean in. She didn't. Instead, her hand brushed mine on the bench, light, deliberate. Not an accident. I didn't pull away. We stayed like that, hands barely touching, the simplest connection. The kind that said everything words couldn't. She looked at me, small smile breaking through. Okay? She asked quietly. I swallowed, nodded once. Okay. And that was enough. It didn't change overnight. Nothing ever does. We kept meeting, though not always in the library. Sometimes the coffee shop near campus, sometimes the park bench under the same lamp. Always somewhere quiet, always with her thermos on the table between us. The work shifted too. Less about homework, more about small things. Her stories about teaching, my half-serious plans for the future. She laughed more now, though it was still the kind of laugh you had to lean in to catch. Time made it steadier. People stopped asking questions once we stopped looking like we had something to hide. It wasn't about rushing into anything, it was just showing up, again and again, until it became routine. One morning, she texted me, 8:47. Same bench. I didn't ask why that exact time. I just showed up. She was already there, sipping tea, and without a word she slid a cup of black coffee across the bench toward me. You remembered? I said. Of course, she replied, like it had always been obvious. It wasn't grand. It wasn't fireworks. But it felt more solid than anything I'd had before. There were still days she pulled back, when the weight of age and history pressed on her, when she'd catch herself and laugh it off with a shake of her head. And there were days I wondered if I was in too deep, if maybe I'd imagined it all bigger than it was. But then she'd straighten the corner of my notebook, or refill my coffee without asking, or just sit beside me in silence, and the doubt settled. Not gone, just quieter. One evening we walked past the library, lights still burning inside. She glanced at the windows, then at me, a small smile tugging at her mouth. Hard to believe it started there, she said. Started with homework, I teased. Ended with. She trailed off, shaking her head, amused and a little embarrassed. I didn't finish the sentence either. I didn't need to. Now, months later, it's the little things that mark the difference. The extra thermos she carries, one for me. The way she texts running late instead of disappearing. The way I stop checking the door every time I sit down, because I know she'll come. It's not perfect. It's not supposed to be. But it's ours. Sometimes, when the nights are quiet, I think about that first moment, the wrong edition book, her sliding the right one across the table without hesitation. The smallest gesture, the kind that changed everything without either of us realizing it. And I wonder how many people walk past their own moment, never knowing. I don't feel paused anymore. Not unfinished. Just steady. Like life finally caught up to the sentence. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?